Okay. First thing I'll say is congratulations to you. You decided to come to a talk on best practices, I think, on a Friday afternoon. So, way to be troopers. This is going to be me rambling for, I want to say, close to an hour. I'm hoping I'll get close to an hour, but if I ramble a little faster, maybe we can have some questions at the end. So this is thanks for leaving the lights on. And what I want to talk about are the forgotten blind spots that we have in our modern infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start. Are we able to close this door as well? All right. So who am I? Why would you want to listen to me for an hour? My name is AdamDoherty, and I am somebody who is a professional problem solver. At least that's how I label myself. I'm a senior consultant with CrowdStrike, and what I do is strategic advisor. Effectively, what that means is I come into your organization, I look at your security posture, and I tell you how to do it better. I really enjoy that part of my job because at the end of the day, I believe finding your problems before they're problems and fixing them is a much cheaper solution. You know, what kind of credit do I have? Well, I did cybersecurity in the oil and gas industry for almost a decade, but I have been interested in this for far longer. So I'm going to start with some statistics because, I mean, who doesn't love those on Friday afternoon? This one is absolutely classic, 81%. This is the number, or rather the percentage of incidents that organizations have faced where threat actors had valid credentials. And I've got valid credentials kind of bolded there, but you can really read that as poor passwords, poor password hygiene. Really, it doesn't actually take a lot of effort for threat actors to get into your environment, and your users' bad passwords are a good place to look. 277. It's the average number of days that threat actors in your environment before you even discover that you have a breach. I mean, that is a really long time. It's like, what is that? Almost 9 months, maybe 10 months. I don't know. It's Friday math. But that is a really long time, and a lot of people, when you talk to them, think, oh, you know, we would recognize right away that we have a threat in our environment, and we would deal with it right away. Well, you know, the statistics prove out that that is actually otherwise. $7.3 million dollars, and that is in Canadian dollars. That is, as of this year, that is the average cost of a data breach in this country. So you think about the small and medium-sized businesses that are out there, you know, the costs that are involved with dealing with the breach itself and dealing with the after effects. Organizations, you know, they either can or they can't afford this, and in a lot of cases, they can't. And what a lot of people don't consider are the run-on effects. It's not just the breach itself. It's not replacing equipment. It's not securing your infrastructure better. It's the situation when you look at the employees that work for a company. If you've worked in a small mom-and-pop type organization for the last 10 years and it gets hit, something like this is going to shut them down, and now you've got everybody who's out of a job. So this 7.3, I mean, it's a figure, but the figures are a lot worse than that if you were to add it up. So, I mean, with that weak introduction, I want to say that I think what we have nowadays is fantastic. Modern infrastructure is amazing. I mean, we've got the cloud, we've got hyper-converged technology, right? It's wonderful. It's changed the way we do business. It's changed the way that we interact. You know, it's, oh, hang on, this is actually sharing, this is sharing the hidden slides of my presentation, so you're welcome. Yeah, this is what modern infrastructure looks like. And what I want to talk about is actually down in the corner there. Right? This is where we are. We've got serverless functions, we've got containers, we've got virtual machines. It's all really fantastic. The units of compute keep getting smaller, right? Which is great for reducing the attack surface, but you know, we'll get into that. It's also good for the bottom line. Organizations can do more with less, and at the end of the day, they end up making more money because they're not having to spend money on maintaining server farms and resources and whatever. But have you ever thought about things at the other end of the scale? Right? Past the containers, and virtual machines, and hypervisors, all of that. Out of the clouds and down at ground level. What do we have here? We've got things like our remote management, storage arrays, backup appliances, IoT devices, other things. Right? These are the low-level assets that make our modern infrastructure possible. And what I want to talk about is the remote out-of-band management. Because if we go back, right, at the top, the remote out-of-band management is on all of these other devices. And it's something that's been present in enterprise servers and moving on down into the medium enterprise and small business since 1998, when Intel first introduced things. And you know, it's great. It's made system administration that much easier. But you have to remember that it's an embedded computer with complete control. So you've got your big expensive server, but then you've got this little system on a chip that has complete control. So you can power cycle the system, you can get into the BIOS, you can make changes to things. But the interesting thing about this remote interface, which is always on, is that it's accessible via web interfaces, SSH if you're lucky, and Telnet, right? Goes by a lot of different names. Dell calls it iDRAC, HP calls it ILO, right? IBM calls it IMMI, and they've got IMMI2 now. But really, the protocol first introduced by Intel was IPMI, the Intelligent Platform for Management of Infrastructure. And this is the crux of the problem. Out-of-band remote management is great for system administrators. But what's great for system admins is also great for threat actors. IPMI allows the threat actor to shortcut the system. Right? It's all fine and good to have the modern security stack, but you know, looking at the image we have on the screen, if you can just drive around the gate, can you really call it security? And it suffers from a number of weaknesses. Right? At this level, there's absolutely no safety net. Right? You've got your modern stack, your operating system, all of your EDR, your other security tools, all stacked at a level where you can use them, you can see them. Down here, there are no security tools. And the implementations for authentication are weak. And the default passwords, I mean, just Google them. They're out there and you'll find them. You know, those default passwords, I stroked out rarely there, but let's be honest, they're never changed. People don't change the default passwords on their home routers. And this is an interface where people don't change the default passwords. So, you know, access at this level happens over unencrypted channels, right? It's not using TLS. It's using old school HTTP protocols for the web interface. If it is using SSL, it's using self-signed certificates, and you've got that ubiquitous telnet interface, which is a fantastic protocol that sends things in plain text. And the firmware for these devices is rarely, and maybe I should have inserted, never updated. I mean, when was the last time you updated the firmware on your out-of-band management? Anybody? I would love to see somebody raise their hand.
Not so.
What could possibly go wrong? Well, let's talk about that. Out-of-band remote management abuse. These are just a small list of things that I can think of. At this level, with complete control, be it a VM host, a shared storage array, some kind of SAN, backup appliance, right? You can reinitialize the RAID, which is really bad if it's your backup appliance. There's no controls there. The system will happily go, oh yeah, you want me to reset? Great. Give me a couple hours and this will be empty. You can boot up a live Linux environment. Drop that malware right inside a mounted file system, or encrypt the file systems at this level. You don't even need access to the operating system itself. You can just go ahead and mount the data that exists there. Linux live environments are fantastic, but in this scenario, it's a very scary thing. Plus, this thing has got network access, so why not just exfiltrate the data at a real low level and be done with it? Store malicious payloads down here. You can store information here that survives rebuilds of the system, and you can just keep reinfecting. Surviving things even like drive replacement, right? These things have their own onboard storage. I'm sure you can come up with other creative things to do in this environment, and this is just what I came up with off the top of my head. But I can think that for any organization, if any of these were to happen, this would be a nightmare scenario, especially if you don't maintain multiple copies of the data. IPMI, it's God home meets Visa, it's everywhere you want it. So that's our target. How do we get there? Let's find out. How about a thermostat? What's to stop someone from using that thermostat as a pivot point? You'll notice here, this particular thermostat happens to be running a game of Doom. I mean, what can't Doom run on? Or a printer. Or your security cameras, right? We've got all our IP security cameras are hooked up. I mean, how many times have we heard about IP cameras used in botnets, right? And even the light bulbs. I don't know about the lights in this room, but in my house, I think I've got like 80 light bulbs down. Every single one of them is smart, right? Every single one of them is on my IoT network. And when you think about that for a minute, think about this. All of these are network connected computers, right? It's a computer that just happens to be brightening up the room or capturing surveillance or printing a document for you. And these systems are all running software. And what is software but somebody's interpretation of an idea, and all software is vulnerable, right? And in the case of these devices, these pivot points, classically they have weak security, default passwords, if they have passwords at all, sporadic updates. Although really, who's ever updated the firmware on their smartphone? And likely, no monitoring. anybody monitoring the traffic from their printers or their phones or their IP cameras to see if it's, we'll talk. Right? But I'm gonna put the asterisk there, and I'm gonna say that likely, most people aren't doing that. And that's a scary thing. Are we sensing a theme? These devices exist within the boundary of our networks, right? Mingling with phones and computers, and storage systems, and file servers, and whatever else we have in our organizations, our enterprises, our homes, our schools, doesn't matter, right? And they're all in here with implicit trust. And that's the problem. So what can we do? Let's see what we can do. We actually do quite a bit. Segment your network. This is something that in my job I spend a lot of time talking to people about. Segmentation is possible, and segmentation is absolutely something you should do. There's no reason for your smart bulbs to ever need to talk to your, I don't know, your Exchange server, right? Exchange server is going through some difficulties right now. I would hate to think that I could access email from a compromised light bulb or a compromised thermostat or some other mechanism, right? Segment your networks. Make sure that traffic is only moving between authorized devices for authorized reasons. Segment your services, right? Is there any particular reason that a database server needs to be talking to, oh, I don't know, the service that manages your sprinkler system or your access control, right? Maybe you need those databases for those things, but think through what those needs are and make sure that your data flows between those services are documented and absolutely justified. You know, limit the amount of communication between your services as another type of segmentation. Segment your applications, right? We've got web applications, we've got database applications, HR, email, finance, you know, group these things together logically for the areas where the information needs to be shared, right? There's no need for information in your HR department to be accessible to the people in maintenance, you know, and if that's the case, you need to look at how you're segmenting your network, your services, your applications. I'm just going to hide this one, but I'll talk about it anyway. Identity-aware proxies are your friend. And it goes by a bunch of different names. Some people call it zero trust, right? But it's a risk reduction strategy that allows you to integrate the technologies that already exist in your environment for authentication and authorization to grant access to these applications and services and systems, right? It's just basically a traffic cop that's saying, not only does this system have access to this service, but the user who is requesting that access, do they have permission to access this service on this server from this system, right? It's about applying those policies that add the user into the mix, right? For that fine-grained segmentation. When we're down at this level, right, use dedicated hosts, dedicated systems for administrative activities. There is absolutely no reason that you should be conducting any sort of administrative system activity from the laptop you check your corporate email on, or a personal device, right? Have a dedicated laptop or a dedicated workstation that is tied to a dedicated management center. Right? And that system is only able to access the systems that are tied to that management center. You can't get to it from the executive suite or the coffee shop down the street. Right? You need to be using this dedicated system for these type of low-level activities. Change default passwords. And I'll just say, change default passwords. Please make this the first thing you do. I wish that devices and device manufacturers would take the concept of default passwords and make it such that the device actually didn't function until you changed that default password. And wouldn't let it function if you choose a bad password. Right? So please, look in your environments, look on the systems that you're responsible for, or even your home networks at home. If you're still using default passwords, please change them, because I guarantee you a 2-second Google search is going to be able to find that password for your device or your system or your application. Disable default accounts, right? There's no need for them. Create accountability. Create user accounts that have appropriate privilege for the tasks that they need to complete, right? There's no need for anybody to have a God mode account or a super user account or a root level account for day-to-day activities. Those should be the exceptions. And those should be the things that are storing in a privileged access management tool where that root password for that device is buried. And when somebody needs it, it sets off an alarm with your security team and somebody says, hey, did you just check out the root password? What are you doing with it? Right? Create that visibility, create that accountability. Update your firmware, right? We talked about updating operating systems, updating our phones, updating anything and everything that's running a piece of software, right? But we've got BIOS firmware on our laptops, we've got BIOS firmware on our servers, we've got firmware on IoT devices. That stuff has flaws too, and vendors do fix them. They're not exactly loud about telling you, hey, we've got updates, but make an effort to go find them and update the firmware for these devices in your environment, because a threat actor is going to compromise you if you don't, because they already know about these flaws. Update the software too while you're at it, right? Even low-level devices running software will have updates, but especially with these low-level devices, right? We don't think about these things because it just works day in and day out. But I, for example, run Unify devices at home. When the log4j compromise came out, there were a lot of patches going back and forth. I updated all of my Wi-Fi infrastructure at home, because I did not want to be compromised in some way, because you can't think of everything. So update your software as well. Disable unnecessary services. I don't exactly know why a multifunction copier needs a mail server or FTP or any other insecure service running on it exactly. But if you're not actively using it in your environment, turn it off. It's just another avenue for a bad actor to cause a really bad day for you. So, go back, take a look at your configuration, what's on by default. Go turn it off. Remove the gateway on devices, right? Especially in a segmented network, right? If there's no need for devices in your network or at that level or in your management network to get out, then turn off the gateway. You can't exfiltrate data out of a network if the data's got nowhere to go. That's such a simple one that I don't think anybody ever talks about that one, but just remove the gateway. It doesn't stop devices within the segment from talking to each other, but it sure as heck prevents, some infected malware that got onto a device somehow, maybe a USB stick. Don't use those. It's not reaching out to C2 now, right? Because it's got nowhere to go, nowhere to get to. Stop using outdated protocols. Now, officially, Telnet became a recognized, standardized protocol in 1983. But the first RFC that actually talks about it was RFC 15. It's an interesting read from 1969. Right? It's a protocol that's over 50 years old. Why? Why are we still using it? Right? I know why we're still using it. It's easy to implement, but security is a balancing act. Just because it's easy doesn't mean you should use it. SNMP for device monitoring, right? Something that's been around since 1988. There are more secure versions. Please use them. Use good passwords. HTTP. It's been around since 1990. If you look at RFC 1945, written in 1994, that is a whole discussion around that protocol. The interesting thing about low-level out-of-band management, like IPMI, it already has weak mechanisms for interacting with the environment. They recently added the ability to perform API calls to IPMI. They added a REST interface, but it's still insecure. So it's just another mechanism for maintaining insecurity in the environment. So please stop using outdated protocols. Go use something like SSH. I'm sure everybody in here is using SSH, right? Like everybody in here is a Linux user or a BSD user, right? Nobody actually uses Windows. Always use a secure option if it's available. And if a secure option isn't available, find a wrapper for it. Find a way to protect that device with additional hardening, additional firewalls, jump boxes, the bad day that you can have if these plain text protocols are optimized in your environment. Doesn't matter how long and secure you think that password is. If a threat actor can see the traffic across the wire, they've got the password. Turn off remote access altogether. I mean, at the end of the day, if your hardware is sitting in the next room over, get up from your desk and go interact with the server. You don't actually need to administer it from your desk, right? And really, you should be interacting with it if you are at your desk from that dedicated host that doesn't have any other connectivity to your network. This one, I am really particularly keen on the idea of what I call get cloud. Right? Understand the assets that you have in your environment. Right? You can't defend what you don't know about. And if you don't know about a device in your environment, go find out. Right? Locate those devices and organize them so that they're no longer unmanaged. If they're supposed to be there, document. If they're not supposed to be there, document them and get rid of them. Right? And once you've gotten them out, make lots of noise. Notify your operations team of infrastructure supporting the enterprise. Right? I'm realizing that got cut off, but this idea is that you've got your devices in your environment, you know what they are. But if the guys that are supporting logging or security or anything else, help desk, right? If they don't know that these devices are there, they can't do anything. When somebody calls and says, hey, I've got this situation where, my connectivity is broken, or I can't access this file share. And lo and behold, it was a file share on Bob's Raspberry Pi that he plugged in 6 months ago because it was convenient for him to share a large USB drive that he had with the team. Right? Your help desk can't support that. They shouldn't support that. But if your infrastructure team doesn't know about it, they can't support it. If they can't support it, they can't defend it. Right? And log all the things. I can't stress enough how important logs are. Logs are did to happen. It's one of my favorite sayings. Log it somewhere else. It's really great that you've got logs. But if those logs are sat on the compromised device, first of all, that device is no longer yours, and neither are the logs. The logs are not going to be helpful to you. So log it somewhere else. Log it somewhere immutable. Right? Threat actors nowadays are very keen to delete their tracks and delete any other logs associated with any of the activities that they are conducting. Right? If you send your logs somewhere they don't have access to, and you send those logs to a device where it's an append-only log, even your system administrators or your higher-ups or whomever can't delete them, then you effectively have an audit trail that allows you to go back in time and say, hey, at this date and time, this happened on this device. Right? Those logs don't live on the device, but they will give you that all-important information that's needed for incident response or legal actions. You get an insider threat type situation. There's a whole bunch of reasons to need logs. I mean, even if an application breaks and all of a sudden it's not generating logs, send the application logs out somewhere because you'll have that record. This is an interesting one, and I get some questions from folks on this. Map, monitor, and justify all your data flows. Understand how traffic is moving in the network, especially at the low level and between your applications and services, right? Is this service supposed to be talking to this server? Is it supposed to be talking to this server on this port using this protocol, right? Monitor these things and ensure that it's documented. Ensure that somebody knows about it. Has it been approved, right? This all helps when you need to figure out why something happened. Or, in the inverse, it helps you to find situations where something should have been happening and wasn't, right? So take the time. I know it's a lot of work, but understand how data is moving across your network, between your devices, between your users, between your services, right? And have a reason for all of it. Create network situational awareness. That's really what it's all about. You can't defend your network if you don't know what's going on. And at the end of the day, that is the end of your business or your organization or, whatever you happen to be into. And that's a very bad day. Be draconian with the rules, right? You've got users that complain, oh, security is making me do this, or security is making me do that. Who cares? Okay? Security rules exist for a reason, right? To protect the organization, to protect the asset, to protect the user. Right? Work with your users, work with your teams to try to make things easier. Come up with solutions that allow a user to do their job. But don't ever skate around the rules, right? Because your users are going to try to figure out how to get around those rules. And be straight up with them. I mean, we're in, cybersecurity awareness month right now. Really, we should be working hand in hand to say, this is why we do this, and this is why this security control is important. Because, threat actors will exploit the chinks in your armor or the weak links in your chain. Insert, I don't even know what you call it, adage or whatever here. But that's exactly what the bad guys are doing. They will find that weakness, they will exploit it, and you will have a bad day. Same goes for any other controls you have in your environment. Remember, at the end of the day, whether you're a school or a business, be that small or enterprise, Fortune 500, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, these are your assets. This is your organization. The controls that you have in place are there to protect you and the people that work for you. So, again, if you've got users that are saying, hey, these controls are causing issues with what I'm having to do for my job, work with them to come up with a solution, and try to find that solution before they try to work around it. But I'm sure some, most, all, I don't know, have probably heard all of this before. Automate everything. I am not a fan of doing manual tasks and processes. And if I have to do anything more than once, it deserves to be automated. There are such good tools out there for security automation. I didn't include it on the slide, but Ansible is one of them. And then, there are tons of vendor tools. There's vendors out here that have got great security tools. Use them. Put them to use in your organization, right? Resources are finite. People are finite. Money is finite. You can't have all the tools. But the tools that you do have, automate them to make your job easier. Automate them to log things. Automate them to alert you when people are logging into things that they shouldn't. Right? Automation is fantastic, and use it to your advantage to help secure your environment. Make your attack paths really, really expensive, okay? And what that means is that concept of segmentation of your services, applications, networks, users, right? If a threat actor comes in and looks at an environment and says, you know what, this is going to take me a whole bunch of time just to get down to this one thing that I'm looking for, like a security system or like IP cameras or whatever, right? It's a deterrent where a threat actor is going to say, you know what, I'm going to move on to an easier target because this is going to be a lot of effort, right? It's a compounding thing. And if you remove that implicit trust that exists within a singular boundary in your environment, you do make that attack path really expensive and they will move on. And remember that security isn't a sunk cost. I come up against this a lot, and I have come up against this in my career with managers who've said, you know what, this tool or this solution is really, really expensive. But you have to remember, what exactly are we trying to defend here? What exactly does a day look like if the business is, and I'll give you an example. I used to work at an oil and gas asset, and one single day of downtime for that asset was in excess of $30 million. One day of downtime. Now, I will say that the organization I work for does a lot of incident response, works with very big customers all around the world. We've got an engagement going on right now with a customer that we've been doing incident response for them and all of the things that are associated with that since January. And so you can think, if you've got an asset that it costs $25, $30 million a day, and it can't operate because now we're conducting an investigation, right? Somebody at the end of the day is going to say, you know what, we're going to just drop that from the books because we can't afford to be down this time. And all of a sudden, 1,500, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people are out of a job. You know, and what does that look like? Right? What does that look like for your organization? If a tool costs $100,000, what is that compared to all of the expense of all of that? Right? Security is not a sunk cost. And use that argument with your managers. If somebody says, hey, we're not going to get this tool because it's too expensive, ask them, what is one day of downtime for a business look like? What is 1 week of downtime look like? It's always a good counter argument to come back. Proactive measures are always cheaper. To have me and my team come in to do an assessment for you, assess your environment, tell you where you have gaps and make recommendations on how to fix them, that is a heck of a lot cheaper than dealing with an incident response team who comes in for this one particular client. They've been in there for 10.5 months now, right? And they pay for all that consultant's time. They pay for all the infrastructure that we need to run that investigation, right? It is super expensive. Proactive measures are always cheaper. Paper's not going to protect you, right? I don't know. Can I get a show of hands in here? Who has had a manager say, "Oh, you know what? We'll just accept that. We'll write an exception for it. Here's a document that says we're just going to accept that risk." Oh yeah. You know what? At the end of the day, paper doesn't save you. A threat actor doesn't go, "Oh, you've got an exception here. Great. I'll stay away." Right? That doesn't protect your business. That is not a security control. That is you saying, "You know what? I know it's a problem. I'm not going to fix it." It's always cheaper to fix it. And you know, going back to the idea of what's capable of the out-of-band remote management level, if they're down this far in your environment, you've got bigger problems anyway. Remember that firefighters are called after a fire starts. Your incident response teams, right, like the company I work for has got some of the best incident responders in the world. But incident responders are the arson investigators after the fire has been put out. They try to explain how it happened. They're not there to hold your hand and try to save your organization. They're there to explain to you how it happened in the first place. Remember, incidents are not accidents. I have a wallpaper that I created for this. I really should share it online because this is the personal adage I share with people. Okay, security incidents are never accidents. There's always a cause for them, whether that's bad configuration, default passwords, poor practices, lack of security awareness. These are all things that all organizations everywhere should be practicing, and in a lot of cases aren't. Remember to turn the lights off. Don't make it easy for them. Thank you. So, got a nice small space here. We get time for questions?
I'll take one or two.
Sure. Anyone? Bueller? No?
On a slightly different topic, what is your take on honey pots or honey nets to try to lure hackers and understand their methodology in their pots?
I mean, realistically, they're another tool. They're a great way to, try to ensnare people and deal with a situation. But I like to think that that's just extra infrastructure that you now need to manage. Really, you should be focused on plugging the gaps in your own environments. Security tools are great, but you have to remember that tools on their own won't save you. You can put in the most expensive tools, the best tools on the market. If you don't have the best practices, those tools are not going to save you anything, right? You've got users getting around your controls because you allow crappy passwords. It doesn't really matter what tools you have.
I had a question. So this is more to do with at home rather than in the enterprise. You talked about network segmentation, and I like to do that sort of stuff too. Even private VLANs where I can, but I always encounter devices that require multicast traffic. And this thing wants to talk on the same, VLAN that your cell phone is on, for example. And I've never really had much success forwarding multicast or getting it to go both directions. You can usually get to the one way and the other, like for example, a Chromecast or something like that. What do you do in those situations? Just let them be on your same Wi-Fi network as you
Well, I mean, in those particular instances, I have actually set up throwaway networks that can communicate. I do device isolation on my Wi-Fi so that cell phone clients, for example, can't talk to other devices. But I mean, you can get really granular. I can't really speak to consumer grade devices. I will say that if you go get something like Unify, which is, I want to call it cheap enterprise gear, I love it because it's got that level of control, right? I think you have to look at what your threat model is, right? And what's realistic. In a home environment, keeping the perimeter secure and keeping your non-Chromecast devices, for example, on a separate network segment. Like I keep all of my lights and things on a different segment, right? It's about finding that balance. It's really hard at home because we've got all of these smart devices and kids want them. It needs to get on the Wi-Fi to work and whatever. It's I don't have a good answer there. When it comes to stuff at the enterprise, I'll say throw a firewall at it. I'll say, why are you using a Chromecast device in your enterprise environment? Right? There are better solutions in the enterprise, but I think in the home space, it needs to catch up. Well, thank you.
Thank you.